Hey, this is Fountain, and today I want to talk to you about studying law. I've also recently did a video about studying accounting and taxation, and if you want to check that one out, that'll be in the description box down below. But today we're going to stick to, the law, the studying of the law. And when I say law, obviously I'm talking about human-created law. I'm not really talking about universal law, natural law, or the LORE law. Those are videos for another day. So obviously my experience is going to be limited to me studying law in New Zealand. That's where I was living at the time. And obviously I want to state that if you want to become a lawyer, once you study a degree in law, you will then also need to do further study to then be admitted as a lawyer. And you're not actually a practicing lawyer until you go through the practicing admission. Like there's an admission, and then you've also got to go through actually getting a certificate. So there's a number of steps. But the one thing I did like about obviously going down the law path, if you wanted to be a lawyer, is that the studying to become a lawyer after graduating is actually shorter than studying to become a chartered accountant after you finish accountancy. Usually getting your chartered accountancy is about 3 years in New Zealand, but to become a lawyer in New Zealand, it's normally 4 or 5 months, and then it just really depends on how often the admission ceremonies are going. Excuse the helicopter. So moving on. So just because you study law or you've been admitted as a lawyer doesn't actually necessarily mean that you know heaps about the law. You might know some things about the law, and it's a very vast and can be very complicated area to study, but also to work in. And I guess in this video I'm going to share a little bit about my experiences of working in that kind of environment, because it is there are some things that I've experienced, although I'm not going to go too much into that. Obviously you need to get your admission, then you also need to become a practicing lawyer, to be a lawyer, practicing lawyer as such, when you finish studying. But you don't actually necessarily have to do that to have many doors open for you. You could just do your law degree and then go on to do something else, or you could do your law degree, be admitted as a lawyer, and then go on to do other things. Most businesses will look at a law degree as, I guess, being something great on a CV, and that's going to depend obviously on what you apply. Like there might be some jobs that look at it and go, we don't want to employ you because we think you're too, overly experienced or whatever. So that could be an issue in that sense. But most jobs, even if they're not lawyer jobs, they will generally look at like that as being a good thing within this current, obviously, time of organisations and structures. It's really funny actually. When I was a law student, when I first started, I was working in a clothes shop, and it was a clothes shop sort of had their age bracket of sort of a 35-year-old woman, and I had these quite nice clothes, and I remember used to turn up to university with these like kind of nice clothes on, and kind of observing myself like, oh, I'm fitting the stereotype law student, because there is these silly little stereotypes that get created at universities around, like, depending on what it is that someone studies, and the law students were always sort of I guess the gripe that people had with them was that they always used to turn up with like really best dressed clothes on, and not to say that people my university turned up in suits and stuff, but we used to joke, oh, we know when someone's a law student because by the way that they dress. Anyway, that's kind of a digression. Another thing that I experienced a lot of within that degree was there was a lot of people that were studying law because of their family and the other kind of connections maybe around them, that were really encouraging them to do it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, although I did hear many stories of people dropping out or not really wanting to pursue it because it was something that they more or less were encouraged to do, not something that they actually really loved doing. Because there is a kind of a thing of, I know in New Zealand for sure, because it is reasonably a small country in the sense of its population, like if you have a family member or something that is a lawyer or works in a professional job, as they call it, then it can sometimes increase your chances of like getting a job or getting to work where you want to work or becoming successful in that kind of, I don't want to say traditional sense, but like being successful in that kind of realm. So yeah, I can understand why maybe the family members of those people were encouraging them, because it's like, oh well, I've already, you know, created the steps for you to then step up and really succeed in this if you want to. But then also it did create some discomfort, I noticed, within some people, because they didn't really want to do it. You know, I'm just really grateful that my parents have always just been like, as long as you're happy, we're happy, especially later on in my life, which has been really great. And I've just been ever so grateful for them to have a mindset like that, because it's really allowed me to explore whatever it is that I want to, in that sense. I'm also well aware that, you know, studying law is reasonably privileged, very privileged, you know, and to study it in an English-speaking country and in a country that people consider to be reasonably, I don't know, a good place to study. I mean, the universities aren't like top universities, but you know, they're still considered a reasonably good grade to study at. And you know, like if you've done your university stuff, or even if you haven't, you take a special class, or if you're of a certain age, you know, you can get in, get a university, get a loan from the government. And you know, I don't can say it's not as expensive as like studying to be a doctor. But it's not as like cheap as like doing studying to do a trade like a builder, or another kind of you know, another kind of practice like being a nurse. And like I said this in my you know, accounting and taxation studying video, was like, that doesn't mean that, you know, being a builder and being a nurse is of any less value than being a lawyer or being a doctor. And also something that I have noticed a lot, especially like venturing into that kind of legal industry even more, is people becoming quite identified with their title, their status, and when things kind of appear to be like breaking that down or really deteriorating the kind of stability of that label, it can cause a lot of discomfort. And that's usually because people can really sort of identify, or even almost over identify with that as being who they are, and kind of forgetting that you're not just that. Like, that's something that you do and maybe you really love it. There is this kind of silly saying where they're like, love law, love life. And I could probably do a whole video on what I interpret that as to be. So yeah, and obviously there's a lot of type A personalities, a lot of, you know, like probably the number one addiction that I've noticed within that is like workaholics. It's a really prevalent addiction, and you know, and that's not to discredit obviously the lot of hard work that people put into, you know, like a lot of people within the industry, especially when they work in big firms, and especially like the young lawyers, they do like 16, 18-hour days sometimes for weeks and weeks and weeks, and they'll work all through weekends. And you know, and then when they're not working, then they're also doing a whole lot of other research to try and, you know, upskill themselves so they can, I guess, try and outbetter someone else, so that then they can then reach the next thing that they're trying to achieve, or just even not lose their job. So yeah, I'm bringing it back to the study aspects. What I found was really good, obviously, is to learn about like the structures and the so-called rules of like human created law. And I mean, you can obviously understand and you can learn some of these things without taking a law degree, for sure. And you know, what really sparked my interest in law was when I was a teenager and I was taking this class, and we had this awesome opportunity where we actually got to do we got to learn about law in the later years of being at high school and secondary education. And I just, you know, when I took that, I was like, this is kind of cool. Maybe this is something that I would want to do at some point. And yeah, I'm really happy that I did end up doing it, because it's, I've learned a lot of different things, for sure. yeah, the law is it's an interesting thing, and obviously doing a degree in it will help deepen your understanding of how it kind of works. But obviously, when you study it, and then when you're actually in the profession itself, there is a lot of things that are not kind of taught, and I guess it's because they're not always things that you learn within books. It's like within through your experience of being in the industry, and yeah, like I could share lots of different stories around that, but I don't want to kind of go into that in this video as well. Like I'm in a really, really lovely place now with where I'm working, and I'm really enjoying it. I have a really good relationship with my boss, and like I'm very, very, very happy with that. Obviously, like, law is very geographically specific to the area, so just because you went and did a law degree in something doesn't mean that you know the law of another region, even in the same nation as you, or the other side of the world or whatever. So, there's something to bear in mind as well. Unless you're studying like international laws, there's obviously there's like laws of the sea. I did a paper in Antarctic law, which is kind of considered like an international law paper. And there's all sorts of other kind of international laws, which is interesting. It's another whole other area of law and how you try and create law within different nations. And I've also realised there's laws now around obviously space and like things that are beyond the earth, which is another whole like really interesting thing. And like law really mostly entails things around, like when you do a law degree, it entails things around contracts. So also like criminal law, civil disputes, constitutional laws. It'll teach you a little bit about policy, philosophy, socio-political aspects to it, and this can range from things to do with the micro level down to like the family, all the way up to, you can learn things about laws for like multi-international companies as well. So yeah, I found it really interesting thing to study. I often found that I felt like I was in a different place in my life outside of the study with many of the other law students, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I did make friends, and it's funny, a lot of the other friends that I made or that I was communication with, they were a lot of other sort of like really genuine, humble, down to earth people too, and they're really, really lovely, and like some of them were really, really, really smart. I was like doing so many things, and so I definitely wasn't an A+ student, but that's okay too. I'm happy with that. So I guess just another thing I want to make you aware of is the job availability after studying, and even after getting admission, and even getting a practicing certificate, is actually a lot less than the amount of people doing the degree and going through all the study. So it can make the options quite limited. And then even the working arrangements for junior lawyers have quite limited flexibility, because of this kind of easily availability of lots of different employees, and not as many employers. It can kind of mean that you're easily replaced in that sense. So if you're not really kind of fitting the boxes of what it is that they want, you kind of either have to conform or you have to kind of leave. And I mean, that's not the case for everyone. There's definitely a lot of differentiation between how things tend to operate in a really big firm that might be like international or national, compared to maybe a little boutique firm where it's literally just like you and your boss and a receptionist, so there's a lot of differences in a working environment compared to something that's really big up here and something that's a bit more smaller down here, and they both have their pluses and their, I guess, not so pluses. I personally prefer to be in a space where I'm working in a smaller working environment, and I can do a video on the reasons for that later in another video. I'm also noticing the sun's going down, and I should probably finish it up here. So yeah, let me know if you have anything that you want to ask or you want to add in regards to the topic that I've just discussed. you can leave that in the comment section down below. You can communicate with me through the various social media platforms that I have, also in the description box down below. And I've also got an email address down there if you want to get a bit more detailed in the conversations that you want to have with me. So anyway, I will see you next video. Goodbye.